Hello, chess Neurites. The 2025 FIDE Women's World Chess Championship has concluded with Chinese Grandmaster Ju Wenjun successfully defending her title against Grandmaster Tan Zhongyi. The match was held in China and saw Ju Wenjun overcoming an early setback to secure a 6.5 2.5 victory. This was her fifth World Championship title. Let's explore the key moments and strategies that defined this remarkable match. So, the first game was a draw, and in the second game, it was Tan Zhongyi who struck and beat Ju Wenjun. So, let's look at that game. So, in this game, Tan Zhongyi had white pieces and Ju Wenjun had black pieces. So, Tan Zhongyi started with c4 and then it was replied with knight f6. She played knight c3 in this position, then e5, knight f3, knight c6. This is all normal theory. Then in this position, both of the players are still prepared. This is actually a prophylactic idea because in certain cases, the knight could get to g5, the bishop could get to g5 and then create some issues. So Ju Wenjun is not taking any chances and she's just playing this. Then Tan Zhongyi replied with knight takes d5, queen takes d5. Actually, it seems a bit dangerous for black, but nothing much is happening. And then Tan Zhongyi played the idea bishop d2, slowly improving the position. So bishop c3, this was her plan. So it feels more pleasant to play with white. And then let's see how she builds up the position. Then queen e7 was played. Now knight d2. There might be the plan of knight b3 or maybe knight c4 or maybe knight e4. In certain cases, there could be bishop into c6, b into c6 idea, though it's a risky idea because this active bishop will be gone. But at the same time, black's pawn structure would get weaker. So Ju Wenjun did not want to allow that. And then knight d4 happened. Now we'll fast forward to the endgame that was reached. So here Ju Wenjun got the double bishop advantage, but Tan Zhongyi will play d4 at some point and then she will have the strong center to claim for that. Then in this position, bishop d6, now d4. So more pleasant position for Tan Zhongyi, but Ju Wenjun's position is quite solid. And then some exchanges happened and eventually we reached this endgame a bit more pleasant for white because of active pieces, but nothing that black can't defend. Now, after these exchanges, so Tan Zhongyi played rook e1. She wanted to bring this rook on the 7th rank. Ju Wenjun played rook a8. And then in this position, Ju Wenjun actually made the task a bit difficult for her to draw. The easiest way to draw was just simply play b4. And after c takes b4, just rook d8. This pawn will fall. So after say rook c7, this falls, this, and it's an easy draw. But she actually played c5 and it is not the most accurate move. And Tan Zhongyi actually got her king active. And then the things were actually quite difficult for Ju Wenjun. Now she should have kept the rook active. So rook on b3 defends this pawn and also restricts the king. And she would have been able to. So it's not one of the most easiest position to defend, but she would have been able to draw. But in fact, she played the move rook f5. Now this is not the most accurate move because the rook is not that well placed. And then Tan Zhongyi actually improved the king's position and now she's trying to put some pressure the king side as well. And then so rook f6 was played, rook takes b5, and then eventually Tan Zhongyi went on to win the game. Now it's really important that even g6 would not help Ju Wenjun too much because there are d5 ideas or there are h3 g4 type of ideas, so this pawn would fall and things are difficult. So actually after this game, it was Tan Zhongyi who was leading the match and she slowly outplayed Ju Wenjun. So it seemed like the match would be quite close. And but of course, Ju Wenjun has a lot of experience of the matches and she has seen setbacks. So before this, she had won the championship for 4 times. And because of that, she knows that setbacks, especially early setbacks, are not uncommon. And how she mounts the comeback after this is something that we will see. So now we'll see game 3, and Ju Wenjun is actually behind 1 point. So she has white pieces in this position, and Tan Zhongyi is black. So they start with the Sicilian, and Ju Wenjun played knight f3. Tan Zhongyi replied with e6. So she had also played the same in the first game of the match. That was a draw. Now Ju Wenjun plays c4, so she's going for the solid Mirogzi-bind setup where the pawns are on e4 and c4, and that reduces black's counterplay chances. Now knight c6, d4, so this is all standard. Then this is not the most popular move, but of course it's a world championship match, so Tan Zhongyi has certain surprises, certain line that she has gone more depth in to surprise Ju Wenjun. Then knight c3 was played in this position, knight e7, bishop e2. So this is all normal now. Tan Zhongyi strikes at the center immediately. But Ju Wenjun is not worried. She will be continuing her regular development. So e takes d5, e takes e5, knight takes e6, this, and then just simply castle. So the king is safe, and then this central pawn at times could become a weakness, and Ju Wenjun will slowly try to push. Now, castle was played. It might seem like, okay, it's all good for black. That d5 is a strong pass pawn. Yes, but it can't be easily pushed, and that will restrict black's activity, and white can actually make it a target. So Ju Wenjun played bishop f3, improving the bishop's position and targeting that pawn. And after bishop e6, she played bishop g5. She's increasing the pressure on that pawn. And by the way, she's not worried about f6. Actually, she's inviting Tan Zhongyi to play f6 because that would weaken Tan Zhongyi's king side. So she's fine with that. Then in this position, Tan Zhongyi gives the double bishop advantage to Ju Wenjun. And she's like, all right, you have the double bishop advantage. You are better, but I have a solid position and I'll try to hold the things. So let's see how Ju Wenjun pushes in this position. She improves the queen's position. Then h6, bishop d2, then a5 was played. Now, so once again, it's really important. Then in this position, white should not be in a rush. White has more activity, white has double bishop. So it's not going to be easy to convert this position, but there is no need to rush and spoil the advantage. It's time to slowly improve. Now, rook c4 was played. So queen a3, knight f5. It's time to deal with that active rook. Then rook a d1. She doesn't want to allow any of these d4 type of ideas. She wants to keep the pressure. Then in this position, queen d6 was played. Did Tan Zhongyi just blunder pawn? Not so much. So she had planned for this rook a8 and the a2 pawn would fall. Then queen b4, rook takes a2. Now it seems like, okay, just an equal position, but double bishops, they can make the difference. And how Ju Wenjun plays with them is something that we'll notice in this. So bishop f4, she's forcing exchange. So she's actually asking Tan Zhongyi to exchange the queens, because if the queens are exchanged, then this will be a pass pawn. So Tan Zhongyi did not want that, and she played in this position, queen c6. Then bishop b5, improving the bishop's position. Now the slow phase of the game starts, and then in this position, as we can see, slowly Ju Wenjun is making some improvement. Those two bishops and that queen is putting some pressure on black. Now let's see in this position, bishop c7. Once again, that pressure is continuing, and it's not easy when the opponent is just playing slow moves like this and then continuing the pressure. It gets a bit annoying, and then after some point you get a bit tired as a defender, and then some mistakes can be induced. Now in this position, so Ju Wenjun gives up the double bishop advantage but takes the pawn. So there is some trade-off that she won't have the double bishop advantage. So, but at the same time, she will have this pass pawn, and Tan Zhongyi actually, like with my queen and knight, so she'll be able to create some activity, and she'll place the move knight e3. Did Ju Wenjun just simply miss this? Is she going to play f e3, bishop d5, and then there will be some pressure here, opposite color bishops? No, no. She had not missed this. She had seen this. So she planned to play h4. And then the point is that after queen g4, queen into g4, bishop into g4. So she had seen, she had calculated this endgame that after that knight e3, she has this h4. And it looks really dangerous for her, but a lot of pieces are getting exchanged and they're reaching this position where she has that extra pawn, although opposite color bishops are there, but since rooks are there, it's not going to be one of the most easiest things for black to defend. Now, I want to point out one really important thing in this position, and I think this was the decision because of which Tan Zhongyi lost the game. So she played in this position the move g6. This is not that great move. Now some of you would be like, but all right, you should play g6, then h5. Now these pawns are like this and it is defending this bishop. So what will Ju Wenjun be able to do? We'll see what she will do. But one thing what happens is that because of this bishop here, because of this pawn here, because of this pawn here, and soon this pawn will also get here, the dark squares of Tan Zhongyi will be very weak and Ju Wenjun will take advantage of it. So in this position, Tan Zhongyi should have played the move f6. Now, it seems like a bit of a strange decision. Why is she putting the pawns on the same color as the bishop? See, it's not that easy for Ju Wenjun to attack them. And what will happen is that that will act as a shelter. So Ju Wenjun cannot create that significant amount of activity on the king side, on the dark squares. So this is still tough to defend, but I think with a good defense, Tan Zhongyi would have been able to draw this. Now she played g6. Of course, this is not a losing move, but this becomes one of the reasons of the things to go wrong. King h2, she played h5, and now let's see how slowly Ju Wenjun takes advantage of those weak dark squares of Tan Zhongyi, and this is something time and again we are going to see how Ju Wenjun beautifully makes use of her king to put pressure on Tan Zhongyi. Now, so king g3, rook f5, king f4, g3. She's not in a rush in this position. So now she wants to push this pass pawn, c4, c5. So bishop b6, king d4. Once again, she's not in too much of a rush. She's like, okay, I'll at some point push it. Then bishop c5, rook a2. Of course, she's not going to give up the f2 pawn. Then finally, she pushes that pass pawn. And now it is well defended by the bishop. It is on c5, but still, it's not so easy to make progress. And then she starts the king march. The bishop is actually doing a really good job of defending these pawns. Then king g5. See, those weak dark squares that I was talking about, now Ju Wenjun is taking advantage of that. She's not going to exchange the rooks. Bishop e5 check, and then avoiding the exchange of rooks. And then in this position, she slowly will improve the king's position, king h6. Then at some point, the king will also get to g7. And then now she's pushing the pass pawn. See, continuing the pressure on the king side, on the queen side. And this is a bit too much for Tan Zhongyi to handle. Bishop b6, she wants to push that c pawn. And then in this position, she played c7. This is now lost for black. Bishop a5, rook a6. Now king f8. The king might also go on the queen side for that pass pawn. So king e7, then just rook f6. She got the pawn. Rook takes h4 is not possible. The pawn will promote. Now she's pushing another pass pawn. And this is just too much for Tan Zhongyi to handle. Then she resigned. So Ju Wenjun struck back immediately in game 3. And now the match is tied. Game 4 was actually a draw. And so the score after 4 games is 2-2. And then let's see how Ju Wenjun continues after that. So we are going for game 5, and Ju Wenjun has white pieces. The Sicilian happened again, and she played knight f3. Tan Zhongyi stuck with e6, the move that she played in game 1, the move that she played in game 3, and now she's playing this in game 5. So in the last game, as we saw, so in the game 3, when Ju Wenjun had white pieces, she had played the Meroxy setup, c4, but this time she changes that and she goes for more aggressive d4. Then in this position, a6, bishop d3, all theory actually, then bishop a7, castle, then knight e7. So now Ju Wenjun actually goes for that Meroxy setup again, but the setup that Tan Zhongyi has chosen is slightly different. Then knight c6 was played, knight c3, and now knight e5. This shows Tan Zhongyi's opening preparation because this is not a very common move. And then in this position, so bishop e2 is the critical move, and then it's an interesting game actually. Now Ju Wenjun was surprised. Now it's anyone's guess if she was prepared or not. It at least seemed that since she was thinking for a bit, she was not prepared. But we never know. Sometimes in World Championship, you want to confuse your opponent psychologically, thinking that they have the upper hand. Or Ju Wenjun might be thinking that okay, Bishop E2 is the more popular move here, and Tan Zhongyi would be prepared. So she decides to play something offbeat, and she played in this position the move c5. So now the thing is, what is the idea behind it? That is to restrict this bishop. Now Tan Zhongyi actually should have played the move b6. So a very logical move. You should try to remove this pawn so the bishop remains active, and then black would be fine. The game is fighting. But then she did not go for it. She went for this knight 7 g6. Now the bishop is restricted, and it's not one of the best moves. So in this position, Ju Wenjun played bishop e2. So now she has plans to play f4. And then there is no knight takes d3 idea. So b5. And then in this position, again, Tan Zhongyi should have played b6 to try to deal with this. It's a good question why she didn't go for it, but that would have been the best. Then b5. So Ju Wenjun continues with her idea of f4, knight c4. And now black's position is quite passive. a4. It's time to strike at the queen side. Then b4. And now Ju Wenjun is up a pawn, but it's not. See, these are the doubled isolated pawns. So it's not about the extra pawn, but it's about the activity. Look at Ju Wenjun's center. Look at Tan Zhongyi's bishop. Look at her pieces. It's clear that things have heavily gone wrong for Tan Zhongyi. Then she played in this position the move bishop b7. It's time to defend that pawn. Then castle. Now bishop d3. Now Ju Wenjun will slowly improve the position. She is not in a rush. She knows that she is up a pawn. She knows that she has strong center. She knows that her pieces are well placed. So why rush? Then f5 was played. Just t takes f5. And then in this position, just continuing with that development, queen c7. Then Ju Wenjun is like, I'll take the second pawn as well. Because, see, earlier she could not take it because bishop a6, queen a6, and there would be this bishop c5 check, and the queen would go. But now the bishop is on e3. So she's like, okay, I'll take it. Now, in this position, bishop a6, queen a6, there is no bishop into c5 because there is this move, queen c4 check. The bishop will go. That's why she goes for this pawn as well. And then this is just actually completely lost position for Tan Zhongyi. And later on, Ju Wenjun went on to win the game. So the 5th game of the match has ended. And now Ju Wenjun has taken the lead. So let's go for game 6. Ju Wenjun had black pieces in this one. Tan Zhongyi played the move c4. So this is the move that she had started with. in game 2 when she had beat Ju Wenjun. So in this, Ju Wenjun replies with knight f6. In game 2 that Tan Zhongyi won, she had actually played knight c3, but this time she decides to deviate and she goes for knight f3, e6, b3, d5, bishop b2, all standard actually. And then there are some options for white. C takes d5 is possible, e3 is possible. So Tan Zhongyi decides to go for c takes e5, e takes d5, and then g3. She is trying to go for the double fianchetto. Let's see. So knight c6, bishop g2, and Ju Wenjun plays the move d4. He's like, I want to restrict this bishop. I don't want you to play d4, and then want to have the control of the center, and then I'll play. So Tan Zhongyi plays castle, bishop e7, then knight a3, castle, then in this position, so much more natural move is to play knight c4 and then at some point play e3, and it's slightly preferable position for white, but Tan Zhongyi decides to go for direct e3. Maybe it would have been better to wait for a bit, improve the knight's position by playing knight c4, and then at some point she could have gone for e3. Now in this, d takes e3, d takes e3, and then Ju Wenjun just decides to develop the bishop. She doesn't have any significant weaknesses in her position. Things are actually looking good for her out of the opening. Then knight e5 was played by Tan Zhongyi. Then the exchanges happened, and then queen c8. So she's defending this pawn, and more importantly, she was planning to play bishop s3 to exchange this dangerous bishop. And now black is completely fine. So let's see what happened after that. Bishop b2. So centralizing the knight. Ju Wenjun is actually doing quite good. Rook fd1, rook ad8, knight c4. Now he makes use of the pawn to restrict that knight. Now Tan Zhongyi actually centralizes the knight there, but problem is that it can easily be attacked, so it won't be as stable there. So Ju Wenjun plays the move f5, defending that centralized knight. Then knight d3 was played, and then in this position, Ju Wenjun plays another fantastic pawn move, that is g5. She does not want to allow Tan Zhongyi's knight to get to f4. Then knight e1. Then in this position, it would have been better for Ju Wenjun to play c4, create a pass pawn on the queen side, and then she is doing clearly better. But she went for a bit of a safer move, that is bishop f6, exchanging that active bishop of white. Now, so it is still preferable for black, but because of the exchange, Tan Zhongyi has been able to make a comeback. And then king g7, queen e8, a6. This is still not one of the most pleasant positions for white to play, but with good defense, she should be able to hold this. Now, Tan Zhongyi made a serious mistake. She played the move h4. So at some point, Ju Wenjun might want to play g4 and then try to restrict Tan Zhongyi on the king side. But the problem is that the moment she plays g4, there will be knight h4 and there will be pressure on the f pawn, and because of which she is not able to do that. But Tan Zhongyi actually played h4, taking away that crucial h4 square from the knight. And then Ju Wenjun played g4, and she's ready to exchange the queens because she knows that queenside pawn majority is there. She will be able to activate her king faster, as I had mentioned in one of the earlier wins of Ju Wenjun. How she makes use of the king at the critical moments in the endgame is just fantastic, and we'll see it in this game as well. Now it's time to improve the king's position. Then f4. So she's just playing king e6. She's like, I want to play king d5 and just create this pass pawn. So king d5, then just she's not in a rush to play c4 in this position. She's just improving the king's position. Then h5, so that the knight can move. She doesn't need to defend this. Then a4, king c3, the queen side will collapse. Now even if king d2 is played, just c4, and there is too much pressure actually on white. This is just lost. And then knight e4, this is defended. This also falls. This, and then knight takes h4. Now these are the connected pass pawns, and Ju Wenjun later on went on to win the game quite easily. So a really nice example of Ju Wenjun. Uh, so she did not create any weaknesses in her position. She made use of those pawns to keep up the pressure on Tan Zhongyi. At some point, she could have put more pressure, but she went for the exchange to reduce the pressure. And then Tan Zhongyi's pawn created that biggest issue for her when she played h4, taking away that h4 square for her knight, and that was her undoing for this game. And then she lost. So now Chu Wenjun has a 2 point lead, and the pressure is increasing on Tan Zhongyi. Now let's look at game 7, where Chu Wenjun has white pieces. Once again, we see the Sicilian, and Chu Wenjun went for knight f3. So as we noticed in the earlier games, Tan Zhongyi was playing e6, but this time she decides to deviate and go for knight c6. So Ju Wenjun goes for the solid Rossolimo variation, and then e6. This is all theory, and then queen b6, knight c6, takes c6, bishop d3. So Ju Wenjun allows Tan Zhongyi to have a stronger center if she wants, but at the same time, Ju Wenjun has already castled, so she has slight lead in the development. The king is a bit more safer, so she will try to play a bit more actively. Then she plays the move c4, so trying to have more control over the center. Then in this position, castle has also been played, c5 has also been played. It's a complicated position. Now, so then Ju Wenjun decides that he does not want Tan Zhongyi to play c5. She plays knight f4 and then c5. Now, this is not one of the most pleasant positions for Tan Zhongyi to be in, because this pawn structure is not that great. And then in this, Ju Wenjun played the move queen h5. This is actually a novelty, and most likely Ju Wenjun would have prepared this beforehand. And black needs to play more actively because the queen side pawn structure is not that great. So if white is able to complete the development, then things will not be that great. Black. So in this position, Tan Zhongyi plays the move rook b8. Ju Wenjun simply plays b3, rook d8, rook d1. She's not in a rush. And rook b4. Now bishop b2. She actually decides to sacrifice pawn, but that would actually make Tan Zhongyi's position a bit passive. So we'll see. Knight f4 was played, queen f3. So this was the point. She is ready to sacrifice this pawn, but black's position feels a bit restricted. And then she plays queen c3. So as it can be noticed, black has won a pawn, but there is pressure over here. There is some pressure over here. There can be knight c5 ideas. Now, it's not one of the most pleasant positions for black to be in. Tan Zhongyi plays the move knight c5. Sorry, Ju Wenjun plays the move knight c5. There is clear pressure on Tan Zhongyi. Then she plays rook b6 in this position, making the rook passive. Ju Wenjun offers exchange of queens, because then the activity that Tan Zhongyi wants to create would be reduced. Black declines it, and then this is actually not one of the most pleasant positions for black to be in. Still, she plays rook b5. Now you have this series of exchange, then queen d4 once again. So in this position, if Tan Zhongyi wants an easy draw, she can always play queen takes d4, bishop takes d4, bishop takes e5. But we have to understand the math situation as well. Tan Zhongyi is actually behind 2 points. So Ju Wenjun has no issues, of course. She's leading by 2 points to draw the game, but Tan Zhongyi wants to keep the pieces on the board, wants to play a bit more actively. That's why she plays queen h4 check. But the thing is that objectively, black has no advantage, and sometimes in these type of positions, we should be careful to not overpress. Otherwise, things can get from bad to worse. Now, in this, Ju Wenjun gains some space by playing e5. Now, finally, Tan Zhongyi decides to exchange the queens. Then she plays a5. She's still keeping that bishop to try to keep some chances, but despite being down a pawn, because of the pressure on the queen side, because of active pieces of Ju Wenjun, it's going to be quite difficult for Tan Zhongyi to create something. And then So g5, she's trying for something on the king side. Now, in this position, she decides to play bishop b7. And then in this, Ju Wenjun plays bishop c5, a really nice move. She wants to exchange that bishop, so it will be good knight versus bad bishop endgame. And then in this, so the problem is that if bishop d8 or something, then there can be knight d6. So I think maybe Tan Zhongyi might have missed that while playing bishop b7, because otherwise she would actually not go for such an endgame, because look at that bad bishop. And now, despite being down a pawn because of that active king, this really good knight, Ju Wenjun will push for the win. Then king g7, king g5. She's going after that h5 pawn, that active king once again. Now rook b8, improving the rook's position. Now the king comes back. King has already captured the pawn. So it's time to stabilize the king side. By the way, look at this sad bishop actually. And then rook h5 happened. Rook g4 check. So if king gets 7, then just Ju Wenjun can exchange the rooks. And then this would be just lost because this bishop is really just, it has no moves. Then after king f8, just rook a4, king e7, rook e5, just this check, b4, the bishop will be lost next, and then this position, Tan Zhongyi resigned. So this was Ju Wenjun's third victory in a row. Now she is leading the match by 3 points. The score is 5-2. So let's see what happens in game 8. So it's basically if so Tan Zhongyi has white pieces and she's already behind by 3 points. So it's kind of a must-win situation for her. So she starts with the move e4, more aggressive than the c4 that she played earlier. Wenjun goes for the solid e5. And then in this position, Tan Zhongyi avoids those main lines with Roy Lopez. She didn't want to go into the theoretical discussion. So she plays knight c3, bishop c4. So this is sort of mixture of bishops opening and Vienna game. So let's see what happens. Knight c6, d3, bishop b4. So Ju Wenjun is playing in a solid manner. So knight f3, d6, bishop c3. So bishop g5 pin is there, but it's not like Tan Zhongyi would be able to do much with it. There is no knight c3 that can get to d5, h6, and then knight a5. She wants to eliminate that that bishop. And this is, we can say, slightly more pleasant for Tan Zhongyi because of the semi-open file, and then maybe slightly better. So ideas maybe she can create with c4, b4 or this pin, but nothing too alarming for Ju Wenjun actually. She just played the move queen e7. She has some ideas of even playing queen e6, getting out of the pin. Very solid position for her. So Tan Zhongyi played rook e1, queen e6. And then after this knight d7, she's playing in a really solid manner. And then rook e8. So see, it's really important at this juncture that Ju Wenjun does not do anything and remain solid, because then what might happen is that Tan Zhongyi might overpress and make things worse for her, as we saw in the last game. And then in this position, so this is about equal, but now Ju Wenjun is trying to create some activity on the king side, and in this position she plays the move knight takes g3, then rook takes e5, and things have actually gone a bit wrong for Tan Zhongyi because that e4 pawn is a bit weak. Black's rook is a bit active. She played knight f5 to stop bishop b7, but in this, Ju Wenjun played bishop d7. She's like, all right, I'll play rook a8 and then keep the pressure here. And then in this position, she actually won the pawn. And after c4, she played e3. She is giving the pawn. So to capture another pawn of Tan Zhongyi and keep up the pressure. Now, so she's up a pawn. Things are not looking that great. Tan Zhongyi. And then just the bishop is defended. Bishop defends this pawn. It's a great position. And then even playing queen takes d6 would not have helped Tan Zhongyi. Just the c3, the pass pawn is too strong. So she played knight b7. And then Ju Wenjun decides to give up the pawn because she has this strong pass pawn on c3. It looks a bit dangerous for Ju Wenjun on the king side, but nothing much is happening actually. Then queens get exchanged, and this bishop a4. Now, Ju Wenjun decides to improve the king's position. Then h5. So h5, so maybe she can play this and then keep an eye on the king side as well. So she's like, okay, you take my pawn, I'll take this and then I'll improve the king's position, and from king side I'll do something. So Tan Zhongyi actually decides to play knight d4, a really strong knight in the center, and then she will win this pawn. And she's hoping that the game would be drawn. But in this, so Ju Wenjun plays the fantastic move to make use of the king. Currently, the king is restricted by these two pawns, and she decides to sacrifice the piece. So, because she knows that once she gets this pawn, these will be connected pass pawns, and white will have to waste a moment capturing this pawn, and that king will be too far from these pawns, and that will be just too much for Tan Zhongyi to handle. And just they played for some moves, but it is just lost. And yeah, so basically what will happen is after knight h2 king f4, maybe Tan Zhongyi will get this pawn, but then Ju Wenjun will get this pawn and then she will simply promote. So this was game 8. Actually, 4th consecutive victory of Ju Wenjun, and after that initial setback, 5 victories. So basically the match score is 6-2, and it was a 12-game match. So basically the person who reaches 6.5 first, the match would be over. And in game 9, the game was actually drawn, and Ju Wenjun retained her title and she became women world champion for the 5th time. So this was actually world championship was the story, comeback of resilience, of experience, of how from that setback of the second game, Ju Wenjun kept the pressure, immediately struck back in game 3, and once she took the lead, it was just psychologically also too much for Tan Zhongyi to handle, and Ju Wenjun won the world championship again. So let's congratulate her for this amazing feat, and let's hope for the best for her in the coming tournaments. And of course, best wishes to the challenger as well. Thanks everyone for joining.